Now go back with me to 2 Samuel 11. Let's look at step 2. Step 1 was in 2 Samuel 5:13, David desensitized his conscience by incomplete obedience. He just said, I don't have to do that. I know the king's supposed to do that. I know that I'm supposed to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to multiply wives for myself. I don't think he consciously said, all right, God, I'm going to disobey you. He just kind of said, oh, man, everybody else is doing it. It's okay. Step 2. David then, because his life is moving on without God's protection, because of selective obedience, because of incomplete obedience, because of desensitization of his conscience, because he, as I did in my car, pulls out the buzzer, that annoying buzzer. I'm sure that he didn't read that part of the rules for the king about not multiplying wives. He didn't like that. He didn't realize that he started driving in his own power. He started going without God's protection. Step 2, he relaxes his grip on personal purity. David had let little things slide in his life, things that went so well for so long he forgot to be on guard. David relaxed his grip on personal purity. It says in verse 1, it happened. See, doesn't that sound so innocuous? It happened. It was just so innocent. It happened in the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, that David sent everybody else to battle and all of Israel, and they destroyed the people. But look at the end of verse 1. But David remained at Jerusalem. Did you know temptation usually strikes when we're alone? One of the most frequent times of temptations are the times when we're alone. David remained at Jerusalem. David relaxed his grip on personal purity. I remember the old days of T-ball and Little League when the kids were in that. You know, the first day they're in their uniforms and they've got that mitt on, and the coach says, all right, everybody, and they all run to the field and they're standing like this. And they're so ready. But after about 3 or 4 minutes, what happens? They turn around. They're not facing the game anymore. A lot of times you see them sitting on the ground and they're picking up dandelions and throwing them. The mitt is on the ground. They've totally lost touch with the game. What we see is, just like the Little Leaguers lose touch, they lose their grip on their position. You know, they're supposed to be facing the game and holding the mitt and at least getting hit by the ball. David is at the height of his life, and David has lost his grip on purity. He's playing with dandelions in the presence of a ravenous lion of lust. You say, you're reading that in. No. We know from what happens that lust is already in his life. I don't know where it came in, but I do know that it was because David relaxed his guard. He was no longer Psalm 101, I will set no wicked thing before my eye. He was no longer Psalm 132 saying, I want to be clothed with righteousness. No, he is a bored, over-satisfied with too many things man looking for a new form of satisfaction. He had lost his grip on purity, and he's playing with the ravenous lion of lust. We need to be doing what it takes to maintain purity in our lives. And I want to close. This is where we're going to start tonight, but I want to close by taking you to Matthew 5. So go to Matthew 5. Nobody could say this better than Jesus Christ himself. Matthew chapter 5. Too bad David didn't have this verse, okay? But we do, so we're even more responsible than he. Matthew chapter 5, Jesus told us once how serious we must be about sexual sin. Most people dismiss Christ's words as hyperbole, overkill, or something else other than what it says. But at this moment in David's life, maybe we should read Christ's words and ponder them personally. Because this is what David didn't do. Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 27. Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, listen with new ears to Christ's words. You have heard that it was said, Jesus says in verse 27, do not commit adultery. But I tell you, anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery. So when did David's adultery really happen? It happened on the rooftop, not in the bedroom. It happened when he, which they found in the last 6 months, his palace. by the way, the archaeologists in Jerusalem were reading the Bible. They've already found the city of David. And the chief archaeologist, Elat Mazar, was reading the Bible, and she said, it says in the Bible that David came down from his palace to the fortress when the Philistines attacked. She said, that must mean that his palace is higher. So they went up the hill and started digging, and they found David's palatial home, which was higher than the whole city. And you could see from that home down into every courtyard in that city. And that's because it's what the Bible says. The archaeologists found it. Well, David, who was there, was up in that palatial home looking down into the city. And look what it says in verse 27. Whoever looks at a woman lustfully up there in that palace, looking down, has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So Jesus says it's your heart that you have to guard. Now look at, usually we stop there, but Jesus doesn't stop there. Look at how radically he talks about sexual immorality. How radically he says we have to look on it and deal with it. If your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. And as soon as we read that, we go, ooh, that's dumb. What is he talking about? That's self-mutilation. He's not talking about cutting out your eye. He's saying radical moves to deal with sin. Do whatever it takes is what he's doing. They understood. I don't think anybody went and bought an eye spoon to pop their eye out, just to... Did you ever have a schoolmate that had glass eyes? It used to always bother me. He had a friend. He'd pop his eye out, put it in his mouth, put it back in. Yeah, it's just gross. That's what I think about. So I don't read this very often. It's kind of... But now I'm serious about it, because look at this, what he says. In the light of David, if your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. It was meant to shock us. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than your whole body be thrown into hell. Is Jesus serious here or not? He doesn't stop there. If your right hand... See, back then, people were all right-handed. Right-handed in their sword. Right-handed in everything. That's why they shook hands, because you couldn't stab someone if you had their hand. They couldn't grab their sword. And that's why Ehud got Eglon, because he was left-handed. So back then, everyone was right-handed, so they shook hands. And he says, if your right hand, which you need for life, for work, for war, to defend yourself, if your right hand that is so valuable to you causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. Okay? Jesus is radical. Let me start something, because I read a magazine article where someone wrote their personal testimony from Matthew 5:27-30. And I just want to read to you a few of their words, because I respect them deeply. It's a great senior pastor from a generation before me. But this is what he said on this verse. The title of the article in this magazine is called Jesus the Radical. He says this: why does Jesus paint such a shocking picture in Matthew 5:27-30? I believe he wants us to take radical steps to do whatever is necessary to deal with sexual temptation. Now, I wrote this many years ago. It's dated. I'm not going to read all the article. But if he thought sexual temptation was back in his day bad, it's worse today. He continues. Let me keep reading. Now, the hands and the eye are not the causes of sin. Jesus said, gouge out your eye, cut off your hand. A blind man can still lust. A man without a hand can still steal. But the eye is the means of access for both godly and ungodly input. As the hand is the measure for performing righteous or sinful acts, therefore we must govern what our eye looks at and what the hand does. If we take Jesus seriously, we need to think far more radically about sexual purity. The battle is too intense. The stakes are too high to approach purity casually or gradually. Now, the reason I'm reading this to you is, a while back, I don't know when, but sometime I preached a sermon here, and I said, there's only one command God says about temptation, and that is to flee. And somehow it got broadcast on the radio, and then it got into the, on the internet where they rebroadcast everything, and I got, about 3 months ago, a letter from Singapore from a drug rehab center. And online, they were listening to our archived radio broadcast. And this guy that was graduating from the drug and alcohol addiction thing, who was also addicted to all kinds of immorality, was told by them he had to be discipled by someone. And this was the most amazing thing. I read this letter to my family. And so this guy who works for some high-tech company said, I'm going to be discipled by the internet. And so he typed in, flee lust. And I don't know how, but he found that message. And he wrote me a letter 3 months ago and said, I have just finished listening to all 900 of your online MP3s. He says, I feel like I know you. He included a $50 bill and said, go buy a cup of coffee. From Singapore, it's gotten out. Someone knows I drink coffee. But then he said this. He said, I've listened to 900 hours. The thing that meant most to me was when you said the way you deal with sin is flee from it. Isn't that a blessing? Someone on the other side of the world can catch that's from Singapore. Jesus said this. He said, if we take Jesus seriously, we must do something not casually or gradually. We have to act. Now, this is where we're going to pick up tonight. How do you apply this today? I mean, we don't live in the fortress of Jerusalem looking down. I mean, I don't know anybody that can look down into everybody's backyard and see people. I mean, you can on Google, but you can't see anything. It's from a satellite. How do you apply it today? Let me finish a few more points of this guy's article. If you can't keep your eyes away from explicit images, don't go to video rental stores. You say, come on, everybody goes there. No, you shouldn't, if it causes you to sin. Do your thoughts trip you up when you're with certain people? Stop hanging out with them. Do certain kinds of music charge you up erotically? Stop listening to it. If this seems like a crutch, fine. Use whatever crutch you need to help you walk. Some people fall into mental adultery through ads, through billboards, through watching people jog, through those who dress immodestly. Stop looking, he says, and stop putting yourself in the position to look. Do you know why David fell into sin? Not because he was a worship leader, not because he wrote psalms, not because he was an undefeated general, not because he was a wealthy businessman. It's because he had unguarded moments. He thought, I've come to the place in my life where that area won't bother me. They can all go off to war. I'll be fine at home. Just go. I'm okay. And as Paul's words ring across the ages, across the littered hulks of burned out and ruined lives that litter the highway of the redeemed, David thought he stood. And Paul says, if you think you stand, take heed lest you fall.